Chromie had a question about the experimental section of the LSAT. And for a lot of test takers, there's a way to tell. And there are a few ways to tell during the test what the experimental section is, and a few to tell right at the end of the test. Let me get out of the way that there's one way that you can cheat and tell what the experimental section is, but I also advise strongly that you don't do it. These strategies are all based on the premise that the experimental section will be one of the first three sections. And we feel pretty strongly that this will be the case because for every prep test, the experimental has been either section 1, 2, or 3, and generally section 2 or 3. So given that that trend will continue, and you know that there are two logical reasoning sections, one reading comp section, one logic game section, depending on the setup of your test, there are a few ways to find out. Now, if you cheat and flip through the book and see that section 3 is reading comp and section 5 is reading comp, then you'll be able to tell that section 3 is experimental, right? Because one of the reading comp sections has to be scored, and it's going to be section 5, because one of the first 3 is going to be experimental. Now, if you're caught flipping through the book, you're not going to go to law school. So I advise strongly that you don't flip through the book, and instead, just prepare yourself well and just do all the sections. Now, during the test, let's say you have section 1 and section 2 are both reading comp. You know for sure, since only one of those is going to be scored, you know for sure that one of them will be experimental. So that will make you feel at least psychologically better if you took section 1, you think you did really poorly, and you did section 2 and you feel like you did a little better. You can just convince yourself that section 1 is experimental, and odds are you're probably right. Experimental sections generally feel a little bit weirder than the scored sections, because the LSAC is using the experimental to test out new items for subsequent LSATs. So they're putting them on your test to get a good idea of how to score them on subsequent LSATs. But really, the best way to tell the experimental is not by field, but by sort of process of elimination, as I've been describing. So if it's the first two sections are RC, you can tell that one of them is going to be experimental. If maybe section 1 is RC, section 2 is logic games, section 3 is LR, and then section 4 is also logic games, you know that section 2 is experimental because that was also a logic game section, and section 4 is going to have to be scored. So if you're lucky, which a lot of test takers are, you'll be able to identify by the end of the test for sure which section is experimental, and that gives you a psychological advantage. It also allows you to come up with a sort of make a good decision about whether to cancel your score or not. So if you figure out that section 2 is experimental and that's the one that you feel like you screwed up on, then you don't have to cancel your score because that one is unscored. Conversely, if you screwed up on section 4 or something, you know that that's not going to be experimental, so maybe you might want to cancel your score. Okay, so thanks, Romeo, for sending in that question, and keep sending it.